Durdle Magic. Thank you for tuning in to Durdle Magic. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell if you like the content you see here today, and leave a like and share the video with someone you might think is interested. Leaving those likes really helps us out, but another way to help us out is by using our TCG Player affiliate link below. If you're looking for singles, sealed product, or gaming accessories, please consider using our link to support the channel. We also have some playmats at inkgaming.com. Go ahead and hit the link in the description to check those out. Alright, let's grab some spells and Durdle with some magic. Hello and welcome back to Durdle Magic. Today we have the Yurlok of Vorthos deck tech. I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. But before we dive into it, this deck doesn't do a lot of the land lockdown stuff. A lot of the land must use the mana stuff. So if you're looking for that kind of deck for Yurlok, you won't be finding it here. Alright, let's get into the deck. So in order to build a Vorthos inspired deck, we need some lore, some blurbs of some history about our legendary creature. It just so happens that Wizards of the Coast published 2 articles with blurbs for each of the commanders in Commander Legends. So I'll bring up Yurlok's now and let's read it. Yurlok leads a thrash of Vaishino on Jund. Utterly fearless, he hunts his prey in deliberately dangerous situations. Lava flows make for quite the advantage when you know them like the back of your claw. Of course, a few Vaishino might fall in themselves, but that is merely the price of the Thrash's survival. After the conflux, Yurlok found his hunting grounds vastly expanded, and he believes Esper could use some lava-adjacent redecorating. So if we look at the lore here, he likes to hunt in deliberately dangerous situations, which is exactly what this deck is going to put us in. So again, if you're looking for the resource denial kind of thing, this isn't the deck for you. This deck is intentionally very casual because Yurlok is not a friend to some people, and it can potentially combo out on turn 4, so just another heads up. So let's dive into the different sections of the deck we'll be covering today. First up, we have preparations. That's right, we have to prepare ourselves for the hunt, and maybe bring a few of our opponents along with us. It will be somewhat up to them, somewhat not. So we'll help them get some card draw, get some lands, all that kind of stuff. But then we move to being friendly with our opponents, you know, Jund style, which means not exactly totally friendly. That will involve extra card draw, but you're going to take some damage. It'll involve you being able to cast your spells, but of course you're going to take some damage. And we'll even give you some mana with Yurlok, but of course you might end up taking some damage. Then of course comes the hunt, and it's a dangerous one. Now that we've helped our opponents get a little bit ahead and everybody's kind of playing a bunch of stuff, we're going to need to make sure to be able to kill everything. And that's where removal and some of the manipulation comes in the deck, and frankly, a bunch of just somewhat, I guess you could call chaos elements, although I don't count things like wheels necessarily to be chaos. And then of course every successful hunt needs a kill, and we do run one combo in the deck that can do that for us by giving our opponents infinite mana or creating infinite mana for us, and a few cards that can take advantage of that, and we'll go over that at the end. So basically the deck is help our opponents get a little bit ahead, try to bring them back under control because we like to hunt in dangerous situations, and then of course try to win the game. And so we move on to preparations. Now this deck will largely use green for these kind of effects, although we do have a little bit of splashing of black in here, which you'll see in a minute. So how do we help prepare ourselves and our opponents for the eventual hunt here? Let's take a look at these cards. First up, we have Root Weaver Druid. This helps our opponents get some lands, helps us get some of the lands. They get to choose what to give us though, and it doesn't really matter what they give us. But besides that, we can always just shove any color we want into colorless activations or the colorless part of spells to pay for those numbers, and our commander does have a colorless activation, so it's not terrible. Rites of Flourishing lets everybody draw extra cards and play extra lands. Nobody hates Rites of Flourishing, I don't know who would. Pier's Whim, on the other hand, is good at any point in the game unless somebody goes heavy artifacts or enchantments. If you pick Friend for somebody or yourself, you get any land you want, and if you pick Foe, they have to sacrifice an enchantment or an artifact. As for a little bit of card draw, we have Runic Armasaur. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of a creature or land that doesn't produce mana or doesn't make mana some other way, I guess you could say, we may draw a card, and may is important in a lot of different scenarios. We also have Saval, Heart of the Wilds, a very Well, a much more expensive card. But it says whenever a creature enters the battlefield, if its power is graced amongst all other creatures, that creature's controller draws a card. That doesn't really work out for us so much, but the more important ability is the bottom one, which is a lot like our commanders and is actually more abusable. So we'll get to that at the end of the video, but it's kind of like a group hug kind of card. And if you really want to be nice, I recommend a card like Scheming Symmetry. Make a deal with one of your opponents to deal with something and go get a card you want. It is one of my more favorite tutors for a political style of deck. And now we move on to Friendly Jund style, where we help our opponents, and they help themselves a little bit, but there's a price to be paid. You know, you can't get too close to those lava flows, you might fall in. Let's take a look at the cards and how we are helping our opponents. First up, we have Xantcha's Sleeper Agent. When it comes into play, you give it to an opponent, and then any player may pay 3, they draw a card, and the person who has Xantcha loses 2 life. This is going to be really good if you have an arch enemy at the table, but they can also use it too, so you do have to be careful about giving them mana with Yurlok. Next up, we have Rankle, Master of Pranks. It's a 3/3 with flying and haste, and when it hits somebody, you get to choose whether everybody discards a card, everybody draws a card and loses a life, or each player sacrifices a creature. In this deck in particular, the last ability isn't very useful, but if you do build Yurlok with more of a token bent or a lot more permanents or creatures on the battlefield, it might be useful then, but here we're specifically looking at the discard and the draw effect. Then we have a wheel effect of Magus of the Wheel. 2 red to summon it, it's a 3/3, so a sizable body for the cost, and then you can pay 1 in red, tap, and sacrifice it. Everybody discards the hand, draw 7 cards. We do have some other wheel effects in the deck, but this one is in particular a creature, so it's easier to recur, especially in these colors, although green can bring anything back from the graveyard to the hand. Next up we have Stormfist Crusader, and its major ability here is at the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card and loses a life. And I like that because we get the card and we can use it usually before any of our opponents can. So while we are helping and we are hurting, we're helping ourselves more. Then we have a card like Bloodgift Demon, which is essentially Phyrexian Arena on a creature. However, it does say target player draws a card and loses 1 life. So again, you can make some deals. You could possibly even win the game, interesting stories aside. Or, you know, it's just extra draw for you. Next, we move on to a Dangerous Hunt. Now that we've kind of sort of helped our opponents, and they're probably at least in the game, because sometimes people just don't get lands. What can you do? We have to make sure that we can put these opponents / prey back down. So here are some cards that will help us do that. Up first, we have Shieldred, the Whispering One. This will help keep our opponents down creatures unless they're doing tokens, and it helps us recur one of our own creatures to the battlefield. Not that we run so many creatures in the deck, but getting some creatures back to help defend us, especially key creatures like Karavek, our commander, something like that, is really good in this deck. Otherwise, we have Sever the Bloodline to take care of those tokens, and it also has Flashback. It says exile a target creature and all other creatures that share the same name with it. And this is also very good against Krufix, God of Horizons, who we loathe in this deck. Cindervines is another great card. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to that player, and you can pay 1, sack it, destroy an artifact or enchantment, and it deals 2 to its controller. This card won us, I believe it was video 2, so I'd definitely include this one. We then have Deadly Rollick. This card is free as long as we control our commander and it exiles a target creature. Otherwise, it costs 3 in black and it is instant, so it is a little bit better than Sever the Bloodline unless you just really need to deal with those tokens. And lastly, a pet card of mine, Spiteful Visions. People like to draw cards in EDH. Might as well have a little bit of a trade for it. Not only are we giving them extra cards, they're taking a little bit extra damage. I don't see any problems here. Wait a minute. We might be a little too generous with this deck, so we need to reel that in a little bit more. So now we have cards like Painful Quandary. We're not stopping our opponents from playing anything. We are just making them have a hard decision in doing so. Next up, we have Incendiary Command. Not the best wheel in Magic since it only does equal to the number of cards you already had, but it does help us fuel some discard effects, which we'll get to in a minute here. It also has destroyed target non-basic land because Gaia's Cradle and Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth are so prevalent on Magic Online and hopefully not in too many playgroups that they're just a pain in the butt. So we want to get rid of those. It also has a small board wipe on it, help us get rid of utility creatures, and you can dome somebody for 4 to the face. That's not the most useful mode on this card, but it may help you out. You never know. Next up, we have Bone Miser, which is essentially Waste Not, but for you. Whenever you discard a creature, you get a zombie. Whenever you discard a land, you get mana. And whenever you discard something that has neither of those, you get to draw a card. Waste Not is also in the deck. Check out the link in the description below if you want to see the full deck list. So, if we end up discarding stuff ourselves, like through Incendiary Command or Magus of the Wheel, we get a little bit of payoff for doing so. Then we have a card, Siphon Mind. Classic card. Each opponent discards a card. We draw equal to the amount discarded this way. When it's 1 versus 1, it's not nearly as good necessarily, but it does help us draw some cards, eliminate some stuff from our opponents, so it's not a bad include. Then we have Geth's Grimoire. Whenever an opponent discards a card, you may draw a card. Again, that may trigger is very important if annoying on Magic Online. However, again, it goes with the wheel effect, so we can get ahead of our opponents after we help them out so generously. Then, if you want to go ahead and cement your position even more against your opponents, you can use a card like Opposition Agent, which I think is more fair than Hull Breacher, but that's an entirely different subject. And now, every successful hunt, like I said, ends with a kill or a prize. So, here's the combo where we try to win the game, outside of just denying eventually our opponents cards and beating them down with our creatures, which is kind of the normal way the deck wins. So by now, a well-known combo in this deck is Umbral Mantle, Leyline of Abundance, and Yurlok of Scorched Thrash. Basically what this does is it nets your opponent's infinite mana, and then you just go like, oh, I'm going to combat, and then they mana burn to death. Yurlok essentially makes mana burn a rule back into the game, where you lose life equal to unspent mana. It says it right there in the card, and that's how you win there. Conversely, instead of using Umbral Mantle, you could use the much easier to get, well, as far as money goes, Sword of the Perons. It will do the same thing by paying 3 to untap Yurlok. Leyline of Abundance gives you that extra mana, you use it to tap him again, and so on and so forth. In place of Yurlok, you can use Saval, Heart of the Wilds, and give yourself infinite mana, which you can then put into other abilities like the Leyline of Abundance to give all your creatures 1/1 cards and make them very, very large, thereby winning through your creatures, or something like Torment of Hailfire, which is a card I don't really like using myself personally, but it's on theme for this deck with the discard and taking back your opponent's stuff once they get ahead, so I include it in this deck. You can also put it into Xantcha if you just really want to take out one opponent and thereby win the game against that opponent, although you would be drawing an awful lot of cards, but again, that would get you ahead of your opponents. So there it is, just a snippet of a Vorthos build for Yurlok of Scorched Thrash. Remember to check out the deck list in its entirety in the link in the description below. Let me know what you think. A little bit too underpowered, a little bit too casual, maybe, but hey, your friends might not hate you. Alright, so, of course, I'll see you for the next series for Commander Legends Commander as we wait for Keldheim to roll around at the end of January, early February. Stay safe until then, and I'll see you.